You know, some thinkers are just products of their time. But others? They're so far ahead of the curve, it takes the rest of the world centuries to even catch up. Today, we're diving into one of the most radical minds in history, the 17th century philosopher Baruch Spinoza. His ideas about God, about us, about the universe, well, they might just be more relevant right now than they ever were back then.
And that's not just my opinion. I mean, listen to this. When someone asked Albert Einstein, one of the greatest minds ever, what he believed in, he didn't point to some ancient text. Nope, he pointed right to Spinoza. This quote right here, this is our way in. It sets the stage for a thinker who didn't just question God, he completely tore up the rulebook and reimagined the whole thing.
And trust me, Einstein was just the tip of the iceberg. Spinoza's philosophy was like planting seeds that wouldn't really bloom for centuries in fields he couldn't have even dreamed of. His ideas about the mind and body being connected, that's foundational for modern neuroscience. His view of nature as this one, unified thing, it's a precursor to the entire environmental movement. His influence is everywhere, kind of like a hidden blueprint for our modern world.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How on earth did this guy, a total outcast who was rejected and condemned by his own community, end up writing a philosophy so forward-thinking that it clicks with 21st century science? To get that, we've got to first understand the man himself.
Spinoza's life was really all about one thing: a fierce, almost stubborn intellectual independence. He was committed to following reason wherever it led, even though it would eventually cost him absolutely everything.
So he was born into this community of refugees who had fled the Spanish Inquisition. It was a place where, honestly, just fitting in was a matter of survival. But Spinoza couldn't stop questioning things. And by the time he was just 23 years old, his ideas became too dangerous for the community to tolerate. So in 1656, they made a decision that would go down in history. They kicked him out, for good. And let me tell you, this was not some simple shunning. The language they used in the official excommunication, it's just brutal. It was the most severe punishment they had ever handed out. Basically a complete social and spiritual death sentence. And what was his crime? It wasn't stealing, it wasn't violence. His crime was thinking. But here's the really telling part. The official charge was for abominable heresies, but they never actually said what those heresies were. And that tells you everything. The problem wasn't one specific thing he said. It was his entire way of thinking that they found so terrifying. So, what were these ideas?
Well, it all kicks off with his biggest, most profound, and most revolutionary idea, one that just completely smashed the religious worldview of his day.
Okay, so on the left, you've got the traditional view, right? A God who's separate from the world, kind of like a cosmic king or a judge who hands down laws, listens to prayers, and steps in when he feels like it. Spinoza, he threw that whole idea out the window. For him, God wasn't separate from the universe. God was the universe. God didn't invent the laws of nature. God is the laws of nature.
What this means for Spinoza is that everything that exists, you, me, the stars, a thought, a blade of grass, it's all part of one single infinite divine thing. He called it God or nature, and he used those terms like they meant the exact same thing. In this picture, there's no line between the creator and the creation. It's all one.
And there's a name for this worldview: pantheism. Now, this wasn't just some abstract theological debate. This idea had massive, staggering implications for everything else, starting with something we all hold pretty dear, the idea of free will.
See, if everything is part of this God or nature, and if nature runs on unbreakable laws, well, it logically follows that there can't be any such thing as free will. And this was his second great heresy.
Spinoza's logic here is just relentless. It's like this. A triangle has to have angles that add up to 180 degrees, right? It's just its nature. For Spinoza, the universe is the same way. It unfolds exactly as it has to. Every single thing that happens is the necessary result of what came before it. There's just no room for randomness or choice.
So you're probably asking, but hang on, it feels like I'm free. Spinoza had an answer for that. He uses these really powerful analogies to explain what he sees as an illusion. First up, think about a baby. It feels this incredibly powerful urge to feed, and it mistakes that biological drive for a conscious choice it's making. Or what about an angry teenager, totally consumed by rage? He feels this overwhelming desire to get revenge, and he's convinced he's freely choosing to act on it. He has no idea about the super complex chain of causes, both psychological and physical, that led to that feeling of rage.
And then there's the one we can probably all relate to, at least a little bit. The drunk person, who's certain they're in total command of what they're saying, only to wake up the next morning full of regret. For Spinoza, we're all, in a way, that drunkard.
So, what's the bottom line? Our feeling of freedom, according to Spinoza, is basically just a product of ignorance. We're totally aware of what we want and what we do, but we are almost completely in the dark about the vast, intricate web of causes that made us want and do those things in the first place.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. A universe with no personal God and no free will sounds a little bleak, doesn't it? But for Spinoza, it was actually the opposite. It was the foundation for a life built on reason, joy, and real understanding. And it's right here that we can start to see how his ideas became so prophetic.
He argued that every single thing in nature has what he called a conatus, which is basically just a fundamental drive to keep going, to persist, to flourish. This isn't a choice, it's the very essence of what it means to exist. And this one idea is like a bridge to so many different fields of modern science.
I mean, just look at this. You can draw direct lines from Spinoza's brain right to our world today. His insistence that the mind and body are just two sides of the same coin, that's now a core principle in modern neuroscience. His idea of God or nature, you can hear a direct echo of that in the deep ecology movement. And his strict determinism, it really resonated with Einstein's own view of a universe that, as he said, does not play dice.
For instance, the famous neuroscientist Antonio Damasio. He literally wrote a book called Looking for Spinoza. Damasio's work demonstrates that emotions aren't some mysterious ghost in the machine. They're the brain's way of reading the physical state of the body. Mind and body are locked together in one process, which is a purely Spinozist idea from over 300 years ago.
And this idea of unity is incredibly relevant today. The founder of the deep ecology movement, a philosopher named Arne Naess, saw Spinoza's God or nature as the perfect philosophical foundation for environmentalism. Because if we're not separate from nature, but are an actual part of it, well then destroying an ecosystem becomes a form of self-harm.
Look, these were not easy ideas to wrap your head around back in the 17th century, and they're still challenging today. Spinoza knew that, he even admitted it himself in the very last famous line of his masterpiece, The Ethics. The path to true understanding, to what he called a life of blessedness, is really, really hard, but it's possible.
And so Spinoza leaves us with this massive question, one that feels more pressing today than ever before. If he's right, if we aren't the masters of nature, but just a thinking, feeling part of this grand, interconnected whole, what does that actually mean for how we live our lives? It's a question that's 350 years old, and we've never needed an answer more.